Some things I went for in the beginning, I was so ambitious. Once I met Mr. Schoaf, found some new ideas that were life-changing. Profits are better than wages. It helped me become wealthy. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job. I'd never heard of that before. Success is something you attract by becoming an attractive person. It's not something you pursue. Wow. Those things really revolutionized my life, and I got so excited about now becoming successful. I knew then I was going to become wealthy and successful, but I think I was a bit overambitious. Some things I went for in the beginning cost me too much. If I'd have known what it was going to cost, I wouldn't have paid. But sometimes you just don't know till after. You think, oh, this is it, this is it. Sure enough, when you finally acquire it or reach that position, you look back and say, wow, I spent too much time, too much money. I let go some values that really are important to me that I forgot about or misjudged what it was going to cost. So I think we always have to look into the future and say, what do I want and what's that going to cost? There's two great words of antiquity everybody should learn. Here they are. One's positive and one's negative. And we studied a bit about that yesterday. Positive, negative. Here's the positive word from antiquity. Behold. That's the positive word. Behold the possibilities. Behold the opportunity. Behold the future and give it design. Behold and look at the chances you've got. Behold, spring has come. Behold, the day has arrived and the sun is shining and the shadows are fleeing away. Behold, the next person you can meet might be your friend for life. Behold, the next person might be a colleague forever. Behold, that's the positive word, behold. Now, here's the negative word, beware. And now I want to give you a sentence to jot down that's very valuable. Here's what it is. Beware of what you become in pursuit of what you want. Beware. All of us could speak back to us in any kind of clear language. Here's what he might say. Beware of what you become in pursuit of what you want. Don't sell out. It's not worth it. The whole balance, I think, is important all of your life. For our kids, so much learning and so much play and so much education and so much time off. And you have to just not overload kids with too much time to learn. A little change of pace. Back when I went to school, we called it recess, right? You can't stay at it, like hour after hour. You have to take a little break and take some time. But it's true as an entrepreneur. It's true in a sales career. It's true for a minister of a church. Whatever you're in is to find that balance of working hard so that the job gets done, but also taking the time. I used to work hard and think, wow, I should have my family on the beach. And then I'd take my family to the beach, and at the beach I'm saying, wow, I should be at the office. So you just have to learn to say, when you're at the office, do the office stuff. When you get to the beach, forget the office for a while. And that balance is important. It's important in good health, right? They had this diet that said high carbohydrate is the way to go, right? Sure enough, it wasn't. Now it's all finally turned around, and we know a lot more. And it's called high protein, low carbohydrate, and all the rest. So you just have to keep up with whatever's happening. Be a student, not necessarily a follower. You pick up a book on nutrition. This one says, if you do this, you'll live forever. You pick up the second book, and it says, if you do what that first book says, you'll die young. And then the question is, what should I do? Which book should I follow? You say, no, read them both and then make up your own mind. Be a student, not a follower.
Beware of what you become in pursuit of what you want. Be a student and not a follower. These are two classic Jim Rohn quotes that have served his legion of seminar attendees over the years in fashioning a high-quality life based on following their own inner voice. Another classic concept from Jim is his idea of enlightened self-interest. Now, many people think that self-interest of any kind is incompatible with an enlightened, high-quality life that serves others. Yet, with a little explanation, Jim is sure he can convince you otherwise.
The best way I can care for you is to care for myself. The best gift I can give you is the gift of my personal development. If I become 10 times wiser, 10 times stronger, 10 times more capable, think of what that will do for our friendship. The first self-interest is to survive. I do an interesting thing now on the instructions given to the first couple, Adam and Eve, after the garden experience. The instructions were, number one, multiply. It's a lonely world with two people. But the second instruction was interesting, and I try to find ways to translate it when I lecture in other countries. And it says to be fruitful or productive. First, you need to produce enough to survive. If a man is by himself and he produces enough for himself, that's called self-care. Then, if he wants to live a higher life, a companion or get married, he now must produce enough for himself and his wife. Somebody says, well, why work that hard when you could just take care of yourself? But that's okay. This is not a moral question. This is a question of, do you wish to live a higher life, a better life? And almost everyone would agree that would be a better life, to be with somebody. But now comes the challenge now to produce enough for two instead of for one. Now they decide to have children. Now the man must figure out a way to produce enough for himself and his family, his children. And the question always is, why do that? Why not just take care of himself? And said, this is self-care. First to survive, then to live a better life. He pays that extra price of producing more than he needs for himself so that he can live a better life. Then the next challenge is that the end of it? And the answer is no. Why wouldn't the man think of ways now to produce more than he needs for himself and his family? And the question is, why work that hard? Why do that? And the answer is to be generous, which is an even higher life. Then I take it two more steps. Why not accept the challenge to produce much more than you need for yourself and for your family? Somebody says, well, that's ridiculous. Why do that? You don't understand. It's to live a higher life. Then I take it one step further, to produce far more than you need. What a way to live. Extraordinary. It's okay to live an ordinary life and a pretty good life, but how about an extraordinary life? To produce far more than you need for yourself and your children. Suppose you make $10 million a year and you and your family only need $3 million. Some families are more expensive than others, but let's say $3 million would pretty well cover most every family. Now you've got $7 million to give, to share. How about that kind of life? It's called extraordinary. To produce more and far more than you need for yourself.
A high-quality life is a life lived with style. Jim calls it lifestyle, how to get joy from your substance. A life that is aligned with values does not have to be dull and boring. Quite to the contrary, Jim Rohn calls lifestyle an art, the art of living well. It is an art that can be developed in almost any circumstances to expand your celebration of all that life has to offer.
It's best to earn some of that early money in lifestyle. Go to the movies. Take 2 vacations instead of 1. Just some little extra things that now the family gets inspired by this new commitment to earning more and becoming more and making the studies and learning the skills and whatever you have to do. Now you make it more worthwhile for the family by thinking of lifestyle changes that now become very exciting. Go to the concert. My parents said, don't miss anything. Don't miss the play, the music, the songs, the performances, the movie, whatever's happening. At age 93, my father, before he died, if you would have called him at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, he wouldn't be home. He's at the rodeo, he's at church, he's at the play, the performance, he's watching the kids play softball at age 93. So he did it as well as taught it. Don't miss anything. So those changes in lifestyle. When I started making some extra money, I opened up an account for my wife, and I called it No Questions Asked account. And I said, here is the checkbook for a new account, and it's called No Questions Asked. I'll just keep putting money in there, and you spend it for whatever you wish. It was life-changing. It wasn't a fortune, but she didn't have to ask anymore for money, because I could sense that it was a little embarrassing at times when she had to ask me for money. I thought, well, that's not good. So the first time I get a chance, here's what I'm going to do. And sure enough, I did it. No Questions Asked account. You can't believe what that did. It was absolutely amazing. Anything you can think of that helps to change lifestyle is called making a living, but also making a life. Lifestyle, social, friendships, church, community, country, all those things that make a composite of our overall life. You start furnishing that with new vigor, vitality, money, whatever it takes to expand your life into what I call the good life, as well as economics. It doesn't take a lot. How much is a movie, right? Even for a person of modest means, $6 or something. Costs $60 million to make it and only costs $6 to see it. Part of it's just simply priority. Less soft drinks, more movies. Everybody's got the money. The story I tell of the lady who invested the dollar, and now she's a millionaire. So she had the dollar. It depends on where you put it. I now have these 4-hour lunches with my grandchildren, who are now 15 and 16, talking about everything. Out on the veranda, La Playa Hotel in Carmel, overlooking the ocean and the gardens. A 4-hour lunch. How much can you eat? Just a few people? But at the end of 4 hours, you're richer than when you sat down in terms of exchanging ideas, confidences, experiences, plans for the future, accomplishments. It's exciting. Probably nothing more rewarding than conversation. Sometimes you need to be alone. For all of my busy life, from Milan to New York to Paris to Mexico City to the giant cities of the world, I do seek solitude, but only for short periods of time, not long periods of time. But it is important for me to get away, think and ponder and wonder about my life and what's happening, what's going on, where to go from here. But some of the greatest rewards are in personal conversation. I've got some close friends, some mentors that have been around for the last 50 years for me, that a couple of hours of conversation and you've got enough to feast on and live on for a while till you can have the next one. But it's easy to be a little too busy to go to lunch with a close friend and not miss it, or spend an evening with 2 or 3 families and enjoy life. How much is a concert? $25, $30, $40? Somebody says, well, poor people can't afford to go to a concert. It's only 8 Coca-Colas. It just depends. So you save up your soft drink money and you do some special things. So lifestyle, to live well, doesn't cost a fortune. All it costs is paying attention. Then the little dramas. I told a story about calling my father after my mother died. My father lived another 8 years, and he spent 1 more year out on the farm, which I still have up in Idaho, where I make a little wine and grow a few crops and live the good life overlooking the Snake River. But my father spent 1 more year the nights, and then he got a little lonely, and so I got him a place in this little farm village close by, so he could at least go there, spend the night, have breakfast, and then jump in his car and go back to the farm. And then there's a place close by called the Decoy Inn, little cafe, where my father most every morning would have breakfast with the farmers. So I'd call him while he's having breakfast. Just takes 10 minutes. Papa, I'm in Israel. And they'd bring him the phone, and we'd have this conversation. And he'd talk real loud so they could all hear the details. They gave me a reception last night on the rooftop. And he'd say, reception on the rooftop. Underneath the stars, Pop. He says, underneath the stars. So everybody gets in on this little conversation he's having with me. Now he's got a story to tell for the rest of the day. My son called me from Israel, and I know he had to get up in the middle of the night. Makes a much more special day. Only takes 10 minutes. Easy to, easy not to. I'd send him these postcards from around the world, and he'd save them. Show them around. When I'd get back, some of them had a little butter and jelly on them, right, where he'd passed them around at breakfast. And then he'd get to retell the story. I was showing these postcards to my friends, and here's what happened, and here's what they said. And it keeps this lively interchange between father and son going. I took him back where he was born in my motorhome one year. Odessa, Washington. Went to the newspaper office, and he went back into the vaults in this little community, and he found some newspapers dated 1903, when my father was born. So we went through them. No record of his birth. I said, you were born out in the country, Papa. There's no record of your birth here. Like me, I was born at home. Then we went back to Wheeler, where he last went to school. When they had a place in town, they used to have a dry wheat farm, a couple of thousand acres in Moses Lake. But we went back to Wheeler, where he last went to school. He used to arrive early, before the teachers got there, and lit the fires in this old stove, 1 or 2 room school. And it was gone. Tried to locate the place where they might have lived and couldn't find it. It's probably gone. The only thing left in Wheeler was a church and a bar. And my dad says, well, that's a pretty good combination. Get messed up in one place and get straightened out in the other. I said, that's good, Papa. But anyway, to keep that kind of relationship alive, my parents were extraordinary, and the little things you can think of, right, that makes lifestyle unique. It's not a matter of cost. It's really more a matter of time than cost. Everybody has a different temperament and personality, and it's something that has to be developed, over a period of time. If you're too shy, you should really learn to push that into a small corner and speak up more. If you're a little too loud, maybe you should, calm down just a little bit. But we shouldn't try to just radically become someone else. But that's what sophistication and civilization is supposed to do, is to make us civil. And to be civil in a civil society, we all must deal with that dark side of our nature, the positive side of our nature. And it isn't that it ever gets done or finished, but that we should suppress those things that would cause us trouble, not only within ourselves, but cause us trouble with someone else. It's a never-ending challenge, but to still always be who you are. But who we are is, you might describe it as dual nature. And the key to life is to become the most of the good in you and the least of the bad. So it's important also to see if you can't work on those things that, are not in your best interest, both in your thinking process and developing your plans for the future, or in your process of working with others, sitting at a conference table or being involved in an enterprise. That's a constant. When some become wealthy now, they have to deal with ego that didn't show its sort of ugly head until, the money was flowing like a river. And now this little gremlin on one shoulder whispers and says, now's the time, right, to, conquer the world and let everybody know you're the master. And sure enough, it can cause all kinds of problems. One of the greatest difficulties of wealth is, handling this issue of ego and keeping it under control. So we need to reveal who we are, but we also need to master the art of who we are presented as our best, as it serves us and our children, as it serves us and our friends, as it serves us in our business. But it is a constant and it never ends. But if we can make a personal appeal to ourselves, I want to constantly work on developing the positive side of my nature and do my best to suppress that darker side that would not allow me to be most of what I can possibly be. I think that's what's important. When a president becomes president, it's interesting, what ego might do. Old Testament says this king came to power and he was a good king. Then the next king came to power and he was a bad king. And that's always happening, whether it's good king, bad king, or whether it's inside of our own head. We all have to deal with that. But we might make this note. It's part of the great adventure to deal with it, to become civilized. and to not allow ourselves as we journey along to become uncivilized in our behavior, in our language, in our style, and to try to keep that balance going consistently and present that as the best part of us, as who we are, and then let people see that.